Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're now doing my favorite segment that we do regularly on this podcast, which is listener questions, getting to the heart of what you all out there in listener land actually want to know. So I love doing this segment with one of my colleagues. I've got my fantastic colleague, Kyra Tyler, former admissions officer at Brandeis University, joining me today. Welcome, Kyra.
Thanks, Shannon. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. And just for the benefit of the listeners there, we will answer your questions. Clearly, we're doing it right now, but feel free to send us your questions. There's so many ways that you can reach out to us. You can reach out through our website, getintocollege.com, through our email address. I need to get it right, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com, or through any of our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of them besides TikTok. We are not on quite yet.
Right.
Once, Kyra, you teach me some dances, we are ready to go live on TikTok.
Noted. Deal.
So yeah, just drop into our DM, send us any questions that you have, and we will look to get to them in a future episode. But let us dig into what we have for now. And the first question for you, Kyra, comes in from Nina. She says, I listen to your podcast every week and have for several years. Awesome. Thank you, Nina. It has been extremely informative and my go-to source for accurate information. So thank you for providing that resource to us. You are very welcome. I'm glad it's been helpful to you. Some background. My youngest son is entering senior year of high school. He has a perfect GPA, ranked 1 out of 670 students in a public high school in San Diego. Wow. He is applying to a range of schools, including very competitive ones like Duke, MIT, and Stanford, to name a few. He is interested in pursuing a STEM major, specifically electrical engineering with computer science, which is extremely competitive. He is on track to complete about 15 AP weighted courses. Now, the question, for his 4th year of English, he is considering taking AP seminar in place of AP English literature. It is my impression that highly selective colleges would consider AP seminar a less rigorous class and would prefer to see AP literature. Also, many colleges do not give English credit for this course. Please let me know your thoughts. Ooh, this is really interesting to me, Kyra, especially in light of his interest in engineering. Yeah. Does the English course, how much does that matter?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. Thank you, Nina, for being a loyal listener. We're super excited and grateful for that. And sounds like you have a really lovely, smart, young man that you're raising. And my sense is that he's going to have a lot of options, which is wonderful. I think as it relates to this particular question around the EP seminar course, and I'll use these examples of schools that you shared. So we've got Duke and MIT and Stanford. So if I were to answer this question for a place like MIT, they are not as sort of strict around the non-STEM classes at a super rigorous level or the same kind of rigorous level as a place like Duke or Stanford for that fact. So what I think is probably the best advice is that not because it's seen as a less rigorous course. Like I'm not comfortable with that kind of discourse because it's not like the class isn't challenging. I think there are a few other reasons to think about this. So one, AP seminar is fairly new within the EP lexicon. And it's not that you don't get English credit for he may not in his high school. I'm not sure. Yeah. I should say, I'm not sure if you meant that from a graduation perspective or if you meant that from an AP testing perspective. But what I will say is that I just think that AP literature is a course that will prepare him better when he goes on to college. And he's likely to have to take like a writing seminar, or any core classes that involve English, writing, humanities. So I'm not saying that the EP seminar course isn't rigorous, but I think for these particular schools, the rest of the pool will have made a different choice that I think makes more sense. So I would say take the AP English literature course, take the exam at the end, see how you do.
Mhm.
At these schools, you typically need a 5 to pretend to make any headway in receiving credit or moving further along in the course sequence. So I think that for these particular schools, AP literature and its history and all of that makes more sense to take than AP seminar.
That makes sense. Can you actually, I'm thinking for the benefit of our listeners who might not have heard of AP seminar, don't know what it is. The title in my mind is not super descriptive. It doesn't tell you
Yeah,
much about what it is. What is AP seminar?
of course. So it's almost like a class that helps a student have the space to do some deeper study and a dive into a specific topic they're interested in, is my
Ah,
understanding. I think it's interesting, Shannon, you and I have done this work for a really long
mhm.
time, that like you don't hear about AP seminar very much. It's part of the
Yeah.
capstone program. And there's like an AP research class that can be the next in the sequence.
Okay.
I think it's because my sense is that it's sort of meant to kind of be a companion to an IB diploma program, like with the theory of knowledge
Yes.
course. Like that's sort of my sense of what the AP was thinking about. It just hasn't really, quite frankly, caught hold.
Mhm.
And so I just think the time is better spent in English literature. That being said, there is a beautiful accessibility problem that was solved by putting the EP seminar in place, because it doesn't really have a prerequisite. So
Ah,
almost anybody can take EP seminar. In order to take EP research, my understanding is you have to have taken EP seminar as a prereq.
okay.
So the barrier to entry is lower than it is like an EP Lang or Lit, which I think
Yes.
that's always a good thing. So we can grab a bigger audience. My sense is that Nina's son just isn't quite the audience for this.
Right. Yeah. And it sounds like it could be a really cool, interesting course
I think
for
so.
the right type of kid. And
Correct.
that's what makes our job interesting and difficult, and why it's challenging for all the families on the line to figure things out, because there
Yeah.
is not, the answer is always, it
It
depends.
depends,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. But I think for this were my student, I'd feel confident in saying, this is an awesome question. My recommendation is to do
Yep.
AP Lit. If you really feel like it's a class that you're not fully invested in and you're really pulling for a seminar, you should make that choice and let somebody else figure it out for you on the other side when you're applying to schools.
Yes. Makes total sense.
All
Now,
right,
do
cool.
you have a question for me, Kyra?
I do. I do. I can't wait.
Right.
All right. This is from Kathy. And Kathy's question is, my son's college offers an optional pre-fall program that eases freshmen into college. They take 2 general education courses and live on campus. Would this be considered a qualified expense for 529/Coverdell ESA purposes? Thank you. Very good question, Kathy. I'm like
Yes.
tightening my listening ears.
Yeah, and for folks on the line who might not be familiar with the terminology, 529s and Coverdell ESA, it stands for Education Savings Account. They're essentially college savings accounts where you get a tax break in that you don't have to pay taxes on the earnings of the account if you use them for qualified educational expenses. You can make a withdrawal, use the money for whatever you want, but if it's not a qualified education expense, you would have to pay taxes on the earnings plus a 10% penalty, because these accounts were designed to be education savings accounts. So Kathy's asking, is this pre-college, pre-fall program, would that be a qualified education expense? And not knowing exactly the college that you're at, how the program is structured, I would say the answer is likely yes. For the purposes, this is different than some like financial aid programs where you have to be enrolled in a degree or a certificate program to qualify for the benefit. With 529s and Coverdell's, you do not have to be enrolled in a degree or certificate program. You just have to be taking this course or courses at an eligible school. And just about every, what you would consider a traditional college, whether it be community college or four-year school, public, private, in the United States, they are all eligible schools for 529 purposes, as long as it's accredited and all of that. So you don't have to be enrolled. Again, don't know how this program is structured. If you're not officially enrolled in a degree program yet, that is a-okay for 529 or Coverdell purposes. It would still be considered a qualified expense as long as you're paying tuition. The tuition for this program or these courses would be a qualified expense. You could also pay for any books, supplies, equipment that are required for these courses out of the 529 or Coverdell. You could also potentially pay for the housing. Kathy says it is an on-campus residential program. Yeah. The qualification for using 529 money for housing is that you have to be at least a half-time student. At most schools, 2 courses would be considered half-time. So I think likely, yes, Kathy, you could use your 529 or Coverdell for this pre-fall program. If you want more exact details and the exact sort of regulations of how to use a 529, the IRS publishes a great resource. It's called Publication 970. So just Google IRS Publication 970.
Oh my gosh.
It's thrilling reading, Kyra, believe me. But that's where you can find all the details. But I think the answer is yes, you can use the money for this program.
Okay. And just so I'm clear, this is like, this person is likely asking about a different situation than let's say a student starting at Penn State in the summer, like as a incoming like first year student, right? Like they're beginning their college career, because there's some that start, like you can apply. So this is different. This is like my kid's doing a fall start, but they're doing like a little bit of this is not uncommon. I just want to make sure that
that's my impression. Either way, if it's the starting Penn State in the summer, also, you're enrolled in a degree, also qualified. So I think either way, Kathy's fine.
Okay, cool. Kathy, you're in the clear. Read that IRS publication.
Right, exactly. Okay, next question for you, Kyra, is from Kelly. She submitted this question through our website. She says, I am a regular listener of your podcast, and I have a question about the mechanics of submitting applications that I don't believe has been answered elsewhere. My son is very involved in his high school marching band. He also plays in the high school pep band and jazz band. And this is a great question for you, Kyra, with your musical experience.
I know my ears are perked up. I'm excited about this.
Though he wants to major in engineering, he would like to continue playing music in some capacity in college. But there is not a particular type of band he considers a must-have in his consideration of colleges. Some of the colleges on the top of his list have marching bands, some do not. It is not a critical determining factor for him. If he attends a college with a marching band, he will join, but if they do not have a marching band, he will happily look to join their pep or jazz bands. My question is this. In the Common App, the activities section asks, I intend to participate in a similar activity in college. Can and should he consider answering this question differently depending on whether or not the college to which he is applying has a marching band? For colleges that have marching bands, I imagine it would be a positive for him to say, yes, he intends to participate. But for colleges that do not have marching bands, I'm concerned that they will think they are not a good fit for my son if he says yes, that he intends to participate in this activity in college? Is it even possible in the common app to answer activities questions differently for different colleges? Thanks for the help.
Got it. Thanks, Kelly. Um, okay, so in that space, so the activity section that Kelly's referring to on the common application allows room for up to 10 activities, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what's the activity? What years have you participated in? How many weeks, how many hours per week, how many weeks per year, responsibilities, leadership, whatever. And then do you intend to participate in college? You should answer that as honestly as possible, regardless of whether or not a school has it. Like, remember that the whole point of the common application is to like cut down on the amount of work that a student has to do, make it
Yes.
more efficient. And so in that particular section, he should answer it as authentically as possible, and students will note, or I'm sorry, the reader will note, your son's interest, and they'll understand, like, of
Yeah.
course he applied here at 8 other schools, and like 3 of them had marching bands and none others did, and of course he said he wanted to continue, and they will make the calculation that he's likely to slip into something else, as Kelly says, like a pet band or something.
Yeah.
Now, Kelly, for some schools, when you go to the My Colleges tab and you start to like actually work on supplemental questions for some of the schools, they sometimes ask this question again, like,
Mm,
here are some activities on campus. Let us know on our specific campus, right?
yes.
Like, let us know which of these, if any, are appealing. So some will ask that on their own supplement. So then he will get to truly kind of match up his interest with the school. But
Right.
aside from that, he should just be thinking authentically about, I love music. I want to play in some capacity. He should check all the boxes and don't worry about it. Now, if he said, for example, like, I want to major in architecture, and he was applying to like all these schools that had no architecture, that would feel like not a good fit. But
Yes.
around activities, people have a lot more grace and understanding. The room's a lot bigger. It's fine.
Yes.
Totally fine.
Yeah. Colleges understand that it's likely not the driving factor of this
Yep.
college decision, and that there are similar activities. We don't have marching, but we have the pep band
Correct.
that
They're
will likely do.
also, yeah, Shannon, they also don't hold people to this either. So it's
Right.
not like, he like matriculates somewhere and they're like, hold on, you said you wanted to do jazz band. Get ye to the jazz band. Where are you? Like, it's just, like people should feel totally fine saying what's in their heart at the moment. Don't think too hard about it, and it'll work itself out in the wash.
Love it. Don't overthink it. Be authentic.
Correct.
I think good messages to take into all realms of this
Right?
process, right?
I think so. I think so. Okay,
Awesome.
Shannon, I have
Yes.
a question for you.
Yes.
Rather, confused dad from Facebook has a question for you.
Okay.
Okay.
I love the
As
pseudonym.
I know.
For
Listen, sometimes I'm confused, mom. Um,
sure.
as my eldest inches closer to college, I have been thinking about taking on a second job. The next tax year, 2024, will be the prior year that would be considered for her freshman year financial aid award. I want to put myself in a position to help pay for college costs, but I want to avoid inadvertently shooting myself in the foot with financial aid. I ran the EFC calculator, which I know will be updated late this year, for my current income and what my income would be if I were working 2 jobs. The expected family contribution jumped 10,000 for the federal methodology and around 4,000 for the institutional methodology, assuming a 25,000 increase in income. So that would be a net gain of 15,000 once college begins. But until then, I would be able to save the entire amount for college, which would be amazing. Since we are a family of 6, I assumed that we would qualify for some aid at our state universities. Nope. Confused dad's words, not mine, not mine. I ran the net price calculator for our flagship state university and it spit out a full price number. But I also use net price calculators for out-of-state private colleges. And on paper, they are much more generous, even when projecting future income. Here's the question. While taking on a second job would impact my quality of life, it does seem like the prudent financial decision. What am I missing? Are there other things to consider? Confused dad.
Yes, confused dad. I understand why you're confused. And I
Me too.
think that this is a really, really hard question. It's a hard question for me to answer, and a hard question for even harder question for you to answer. There are just a couple of specific points wrapped up in this question that I wanted to touch on briefly.
Okay.
Confused dad says he ran the EFC calculator. He knows is going to be updated late this year. I think that that's an important point, that right now we are in the midst of a transition. The FAFSA that opens up for next year is going to be a very different FAFSA with a very different financial aid calculation associated with it. The
Okay.
EFC calculator and the net price calculator that Confused Ed has also run, those are typically our go-to tools of figuring out what kind of financial aid eligibility you will have. They are still the best tools we have, but I think at this particular point in time, you really have to take them with a grain of salt because they are not updated with the new formula yet. Essentially, the Department of Education has not fully released all the technical specifications that are necessary to update these calculators. So take calculator results with a grain of salt at this particular point in time. And the other point about the estimates of an EFC calculator, he says, he thinks without the extra job, he would have maybe $10,000 more financial aid eligibility. A really important specific point about the financial aid process is your financial aid eligibility does not necessarily equate to how much financial aid you will actually receive. Essentially, your financial aid eligibility is the most you could receive in financial aid.
Okay.
But most colleges do not have enough money to meet every student's full eligibility. So you may receive well less than that. So I think that's a point to take into consideration when weighing your options here. Maybe you're eligible for more aid without the extra job, but do you actually get the aid? That is not a guarantee. So I just think that uncertainty needs to be taken into consideration. Is, the bird in the hand, the job with the extra money that is going to pay you $25,000 extra, is that more valuable to you than the possible extra financial aid associated with not working the job? The bird in the hand worth more than the two in the bush. I just think it has to enter the thought process here, which doesn't make things easier. It makes things harder, of course.
Sure.
The other point I wanted to talk about just a smidge is that Confused Dad here found, running the net price calculators, that the private colleges were much more generous with financial aid. And I think that is just an important point for everyone on the line to understand, that can absolutely happen. Private colleges tend to have a massive sticker price. Almost no one, if you look at the numbers, actually pays the full sticker price. It's like 90% of students get some type of discount with scholarships or grants at private colleges. So I would not exclude private colleges from your selection process based simply on their sticker price, because your net price may be well less than that. And again, the net price calculator that is available on every college's website should help you get to what your actual cost at any particular school would be. Again, granting that they're not particularly accurate at this given moment in time, unfortunately. Still, our best estimates. But I do want to say we actually cut it out of this question. So it wasn't in the part that you read, Kyra, but I actually saw this question come in on Facebook, and Confused Dad told us his income. He told us the state he lives in. And I am surprised that the net price calculator at his state universities showed no aid eligibility. So this is a point specific to Confused Dad. I might give a second look at the net price calculator at your, I did the calculator with your numbers at your flagship state university. And of course, I don't know your whole financial situation. So it's possible that the result was accurate for you, but using the assumptions I plugged in, you qualified for some financial aid. So Confused Dad, I take a second look at the net price calculators. But with all that in mind, Dad's essential question, while taking on a second job would impact my quality of life. It does seem like the prudent decision. What should I be considering here? Like, I don't have an answer to that. Unfortunately, I think there are trade-offs that you really do have to weigh. Yes, financially, it makes more sense to work the second job, and that's guaranteed money. And it helps keep you and your kids out of debt. And think about the quality of your life and your kids' life after graduation. If they have to take on more debt, what is the quality of life looking like at that point? By the same token, I'm thinking about this like as a mom, and these might be like my last few years with my kids at home. And do I want to take on a second job that's going to be taking up a lot of my time that I could be spending with my kids, in these last few years that I have them at home? So, so Confused Dad, like, I think that's what you need to think about. And I give you major kudos for really thinking about and weighing these options. I talked
proactive.
Yes. I talk to so many people who don't think about this till the last minute and, are looking, how do I borrow all these student loans? That's kind of the only option available if you wait too long. So thinking about it in advance, I think, is awesome. And I don't have a great answer for you, but I think you just have to weigh the trade-offs here.
Shannon, the one thing that I was thinking about too is like, I don't know if this is the first student to, first child or a family of 6, kind of seem like the first child. Also, like, are you setting yourself up for the next however many years of working a second job while your kids are in college? And to your point, sort of about quality of life, I think that that's a question that only, he and or a partner, a family, kids can answer. But, this could be setting sort of a precedent around this idea. And like, what does that do with quality time?
Exactly. Yeah. So hard.
I know it is hard. Good question. So Confused Dad.
We feel your pain.
We do feel
We're confused too, Confused Dad. We don't have an answer for you. Okay, next question for you, Kyra, comes in from Joe.
Okay.
And he says, in the other information, quote unquote, section of the college application, would it be worthwhile to give insight into your application plans? Statements like, I'm applying to 5 schools, A, B, C, D, and E. I really like your school, but can't apply early decision for financial reasons. You are the only Ivy League college I'm applying to because you are my top choice, and I really mean it. I can see that public schools might not read this, but would this make a difference for selective private schools like Brown, Emory, Wash U? Or maybe kids who just rank like medical schools do. That's the commentary from Joe. So what do you think about this other information section? Should you be sending messages to schools in there about your application process?
Absolutely not. I will, that's my final answer. Firm.
This is not an it depends. This is a hard no from Kyra.
This is a hard no. I'll give a little color, which is that for folks listening, it's additional information section on the common application allows for students to write about things that they haven't been able to address. This is really meant for extenuating circumstances. So I was absent 26 days and received homebound instruction in 10th grade because I had, I was recovering from a concussion, or, my grandparent got really sick and they live in our home and I had to take responsibility for my siblings and my grades dipped, and like it's really extenuating circumstances, not to, it's, we always say like it's not to share excuses, right? This is also a spot where if someone kind of messed up a little bit and, they got an infraction, or, they used chat
Yeah.
GPT and shouldn't have, like, this is not the time to make an excuse, but just to lay out the facts, but only if you really think somebody needs to know. The bottom line is this is your student's business. Nobody else needs to know where else they're applying. It really won't be helpful, and it actually could harm them a little bit, because then schools could start being like, oh, well, we know Emory and WashU are going to do this and we're going to do, I just, let me say this, 95% plus of all applicants leave this section blank. It is intended to be blank. So if it has something in there, make it really worth it. And I don't think that this is information that will be helpful in the process.
No. And for schools that track demonstrated interest, there's other better ways to show interest, correct?
That's right. Do a visit, do an interview, do some online programming. Those are all better ways in which to show your interest. So
That is perfect. Thank you, Kyra. And I think that that's actually all the
that it?
time that we
Okay.
have for today. It went
Okay.
really, really fast. I know. You have to come back, Kyra, because I want to chat
That
about
was so
questions with
fun.
you. I know. So actually, you know what? We have maybe 1 minute since we're
Okay.
entering into summer. Any tips for the rising seniors, what they should do with their summer besides go to the
Sure.
beach?
Yes. Go
Or
to
is
the
that the
beach.
primary task? It's my primary task.
Right. Get some rest, right?
Yes.
Take that vacation, and also work every day. I would say starting like 2 weeks from the end of your junior year, give yourself a breather. Like
Mhm.
2 weeks out, you should touch college every day in some
Mm.
way. Maybe it's 15 minutes. You're going to like sign up
Yeah.
for a mailing list. You're going to go through your email, call some stuff. Maybe you're going to get a new email address that's specifically for college applications. Maybe the next day you'll spend 45 minutes doing a virtual tour. Like every day, probably give yourself a breather and then get into it. Start your essays by July. Start either your
Love it.
PIQs for the California schools, or your main
Mhm.
essay for the college for the common application by July.
I love it. You're a taskmaster and I love it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kyra, for being a taskmaster and for answering all these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps other folks find us. So we want to be able to share this info with as many folks as possible. Definitely join us next week. Put that on your summer to-do list. We're going to be looking at more kind of hidden gem colleges, George Fox University, as well as Embry-Riddle Aeronautical Institute. So that's really exciting. We're also going to be looking for you parents of seniors or graduates, I will call you now, parents of graduates or graduates yourselves. We're going to be looking at the remaining paperwork that you've got to do. You're not quite done yet, so don't delete this show from your feed yet. We still have some great content coming. And just by the way, talking about next week's episode, we are expecting some big decisions coming out of the Supreme Court in the next week or two about race-conscious admissions, about student loan debt relief. When those decisions come out, we will likely be preempting our regularly scheduled episode. So that's likely to happen in the next few weeks. So definitely stay tuned to your feed for information on the Supreme Court decisions and how those may affect you. And definitely tune in next week. Remember, we are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific.